Hello and welcome to another discussion in the SF Masterworks reading group. This is a monthly series where we discuss one of the books from the SF Masterworks collection published by Gollancz. We're pretty much making our way through the series in the order they were published as Masterworks. And the book for today is going to be Stand on Zanzibar by John Brunner. And the books coming up for the next 3 months, if you're reading along with us, are The Dispossessed by Ursula K. Le Guin for the month of November, uh, The Drowned World by J.G. Ballard for the month of December, and The Sirens of Titan by Kurt Vonnegut for January. Yeah, with that, I will let my companions introduce themselves. Jared, could you start us off?
Yes, I'm Jared at the Fantasy Thinker YouTube channel and also on Speculative Speculation podcast and other fine podcasts on pagechewing.com. And Susanna?
Hello, my name is Susana Imaginario. I'm the author of Weird Gods and other books, and I run the YouTube channel Den of the Weird.
Very nice. Yeah, so Stand on Zanzibar. That was a big book, right? It was an outlier in one, like among all the ones we did. The typical site length has been between 200 to 300 pages. Cities in Flight even doesn't count because that was a collection of 4 books. So this is the biggest book that we've read so far. Yeah, what do you guys think? Any high level impressions?
It's a brick, indeed. I just checked the sheet, the Excel sheet, and I saw your rating, Jared. Kind of opposite. So yeah, it's a brick. I can see why it's a masterwork. It is a masterwork. It's just I can't even begin to fathom the amount of work that was put into this, the level of skill and craft required. But it's not entertaining. It was not an enjoyable read. There's a few moments like the hate crime vocab kind of pushed me through there, but for the most of it, it was really hard. It was hard to read. It took me over 2 weeks to read it, and that's a lot for me because you can't skim, you can't slow down, you can't even process. It's just about it. There's so much to get through. Why? It's like I understand why this is a masterwork, but there was no need. Seriously, you could have condensed this a little bit.
Yeah, I found it to be a chaotic mess at sometimes. He chose a specific structure with, and I don't know if it does it in your version of the book, but the beginning, the contents actually breaks down the structure into 3 different parts. So the contents aren't in order, they aren't in page order. The contents are in the structure of the book order. And so if you keep looking back at the contents as you get to each, broken up section in the book, that's our context, continuity, and, other stuff.
The happening world, yeah.
The happening world, then you can go back to the contents, the content page, and see which section it's in and where the previous section was and where the section after that was. And I think if he would have actually broken the book up into 3 parts and maybe put those as the story, it might have made sense in the beginning, but it wouldn't have made sense towards the end. Because I thought the last 100 pages, or maybe 150, actually made a lot more sense than the first 350 pages. And because it actually started turning more into a story rather than this broken up chaotic essay of overpopulation. And I was just like, I had a hard time getting through the first 300 pages. I really was on the verge of making this my first DNF ever because of that. So that's pretty big. I mean, I forced my way through Moby Dick, as boring as that was, and it's Moby Dick's a classic, but I found it so boring. But I forced my way through it, and I didn't want to DNF it, and I wanted to finish it, and I'm glad I did. This one, I finished this for you guys, just so you know.
Thank you, Jared.
No, same here. If it wasn't for this group, I would not have bothered. But yeah, I agree. It's so fragmented. I mean, I love fragmented narratives. I write, that way. But this was a whole new level of fragmentation. It was really hard to put the things together, to just, because you were always being pulled out of the narrative. You were always being interrupted by this little short story or the side or piece of propaganda or whatever. You could never get a grip on the actual story. I mean, I would happily read just the context bits separately, and then the hate crime vocabulary in separate books, and they would be amazing. And then just the story, maybe a little. Absolutely right, Jared. You nailed it. It's just, I get the skill, I get the intention, but it's not an enjoyable read. I don't know.
Yeah. This guy, his skill is undebatable. He's definitely a highly skilled writer. But it's just the book itself. That structure drove me nuts.
It's interesting because he tells you how this book is going to be structured in that little introduction we have on the Innis mode, right? What that is, which is just like information presented randomly, and you absorb and take what you want from it. Like, they're not going to try and draw a connection, like whoever presents information in Innis mode. And I think I realized after the first chapter or something, because of the huge dump we have of Scandalizer news, that the Innis mode is basically telling us how this book might be written. And that was, the idea of that is fascinating for me, like just in and of itself. But the fact that he did that with a 650 odd page book, that I was very curious about how that would come about. And it has, like, I think a large part of it is he's giving us the state of the world with, the tracking with close-up section, for instance. He gives us a lot of different people before we circle back to someone we've seen before and follow them up from where we saw them previously, right? Like that couple that moved to Puerto Rico to have a baby, and there's another pregnant woman who decided she wants to stay on drugs the whole time so the baby never sees the real world, whatever. Like all these people who we see once and then we revisit them later. So I think what he's done is pretty interesting. I think the structure and the style for me is the most interesting aspect of the book, or one of the most interesting aspects in any case. Yeah, not the most, one of the most interesting aspects. I think it was just fascinating how he has made that work. I haven't finished the last 50 pages, like I was telling Jared and Susanna before we started, because I'm on vacation and I read when I could. But yeah, the structure is pretty fascinating. I don't know in terms of enjoyment where I'd rate it. I feel like I'm a bland neutral about it. I don't dislike it. I don't particularly like it either. Like this, if we weren't reading it for this group, I wouldn't have gone back to it as often as I did. Like I'd probably have read it over 3 months or something, and maybe that would have made me appreciate it a lot more. right now it felt a little bit like a chore because until Chad Mulligan showed up as a character, for instance, it was still like, okay, I'm not interested in anybody we are following. And yeah, so maybe I'm veering a little less on the did not enjoy too much, but I appreciate it quite a lot.
Yeah, yeah, and that's fair.
Exactly.
That's fair. It's funny because you don't even realize, um, like by the time you get to the end of the book, it's like Donald and Norman are kind of the main characters when you get to the end of the book, but you don't even realize at the beginning of the book at all. And so eventually it starts coming back to Donald more, and it starts coming back to Norman more, but it took a long time to get there, to realize, okay, here's the characters I can actually latch onto, whether I like them or not, and you get a little sense of following, and I just found myself when we finally started following those two a little more regularly, I found myself kind of speed reading over the parts that didn't include them because I actually wanted more of a story. Because when we got more of a story, it was actually a little more enjoyable, and especially when like I said, the last 100 pages, you get more into like the espionage stuff and the spy stuff and the political stuff of them trying to make this Norman trying to do his job and make this work in this country. And um, so it was, like I said, it was enjoyable at that point, finally. And I was just like, okay, I can get through the rest. I'll be all right.
Yeah, and I suspect you didn't miss too much by doing that. It
No.
is. I think what the bits in between are doing is basically presenting the same thing in different ways, right? Telling us what the rest of the world is getting from it, how other people are perceiving this, what is being filtered out to to make public announcements of, and so on, which is fascinating. But we've seen that in the first 500 pages.
Yeah.
But the attention to detail to really give the context for the story, the way the characters were introduced, etc. But just the way that it shows to do it. I remember at the beginning, I almost DNF'd because I was thinking, well, if I wanted to get this upset and annoyed and just read little bits of information, I would be on Twitter. Because he really had that social media, that Twitter feel of one thing and then the other completely different, and just this aside, this better not keep going. And for a long time, I was reading and just, what the hell? What's the point? See, we get the idea of the state of affairs in the world. I thought it was just a rant on society and human nature. And it is, to some degree, just that finally there was a narrative attached to it. I'm still questioning why. I would love to, pick this writer's brain. Just
Yeah, it was interesting. Like I have a lot of tabs on this thing because there was a lot of like one-line stuff that was like, oh wow, that's pretty fascinating. And there was a lot of stuff I was pointing out that was like, oh wow, this was written in 1967, and it seems like he had his pulse upon the science of the future and or the social problems that could occur in the future. And
it
he
is well
definitely,
done.
yeah, it was well done in that sense, and he definitely seemed to have his finger on the pulse of something at the time. And there was a lot of social commentary on, of course, religion. There was a lot of social commentary on the draft. He obviously was not a big fan of the draft, and there was a lot of social commentary on the advent of computers and what that's going to mean for humanity. And that was pretty good stuff, if you were looking for that social commentary. And if I would have liked to have seen a lot of that stuff in a paper for for a school or something like that, rather than trying to put it in this weird context of a story that's not a story until later on when it's a story.
Mhm. Yeah, I thought it was funny because towards the end, I was, because I was complaining all the way through, and praising and complaining in equal amounts. But I was like, this is not a novel. This is not a novel. And then right at the last page, the last entry, that the author calls it a non-novel.
Yeah.
So I was like, okay, so point made, well done.
Yep. Yeah, and it's kind of funny because it's and he tells you what he typed it on, but
Yeah, and then exactly, and then goes on. I didn't need to know that, it just
right.
went too far again.
Yeah.
So, given that I haven't finished, if I had to guess based on the whole Innis mode introduction we got, I think the two threads, Norman and um, what's his name? Donald. I think the two threads don't end up tying together, right? They're just two separate stories. Is that what happens, or do they actually tie together in the
No,
end?
they do tie together. Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, you'll
Interesting. I was expecting them to not die together.
Yep.
Go
No,
ahead. Sorry.
they all come full circle. And Chad too.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
So it actually ties up fairly nice. The ending's pretty satisfying, I would say.
Nice.
To a certain extent. And the the resolution, it isn't like super tidy resolution or anything like that. It's
Mm.
fairly open-ended enough to make you think about stuff, everything that went on, and whether or not they did the right thing or not. That's all up in the air in a good way. That makes you think a little bit. And so I like I said, I enjoyed the ending. I enjoyed the last 100 pages. I thought it was a pretty cool story after you got all the nonsense out of the way.
So I have a question for the group. Do you think Chad Mulligan is sort of the stand-in for the author's opinions? Do you think he's reflecting pretty much like all his opinions, or at least some of them are reflecting the author's opinions?
It's a good question.
I don't
'Cause
know.
he's
I don't like to speculate too much about authors' opinions. Go ahead.
Yeah. I I think he's a stand-in for a narrative tool that the author wanted to use. That's evident. He definitely used Chad's. I don't know if they were recordings or they were written articles or whatever Chad was doing with his life there. He used that especially in the first half of the book. It was used as a part of that weird, chaotic jumping, information dumping that he was doing. Chad's opinions were just a part of that, all that stuff that he was presenting about the world and the world around him. And he used Chad as a unapologetic kind of bitching session, that for a lot of the his articles and stuff like that. Um, and then Chad became a real character by the end of the book, which was interesting in of itself because he's presented a little bit differently, not as abrasive and forceful as in some of his opinion pieces. And so it kind of speaks to the nature of perspective on a character. So whether or not it was the author's actual views or not, I wouldn't spec. I don't think so. I think the author was using him on purpose the way he did, quite deliberately.
Makes sense. I did wonder for until we met Chad like in person, so to speak. I wondered if some of the opinions were the authors or extreme versions of the authors. Like, not that there's any way we can find out, but they are, very strongly worded opinions about the state of the world and about people. So, and there weren't too many, let's say, counters to his opinions. So I did wonder if that was the author's opinions being presented to us. But he was a character, or his writings, I had such a love-hate relationship with them. Like the hip crime vocabulary, loved every single definition, thought they were fantastic. But I think it was primarily the excerpts from You Beast, was that what that book was called, which drove me nuts. The broad strokes with which he gave all those opinions. And like and I kept railing at it. I was like, based on what data are you saying this? I think it wasn't so much what was said as how it was said, like he just knew without seeming to back it up with evidence. There might have been evidence for all I know, but it didn't feel substantiated, and it drove me nuts. But there were other parts that I really liked, and he was easily my favorite character to follow, even though he wasn't on the page too much. Yeah. Cool. Any other?
And I don't think anything was done by accident by Brunner in this book at all.
No, not a word misplaced.
I think everything was carefully said and placed where he wanted it.
Yeah. I think this would be, if I were inclined to engage in it, it would be a fascinating reread, I think, to find all the connections that maybe we didn't have before. Is it just me frozen or someone else? Okay, cool. Yeah, I think that knowing what we know about the world and how things are, because a book takes a while to get used to. So I think going back to the beginning, knowing what we know about the world would make the reading experience pretty different.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't know if I'll ever have the courage though. But if I ever reread it, I will read in a different order, or I would follow each part through. Maybe I'll see something that way that I missed skipping through all these different parts.
Yeah,
that'd be an interesting experiment for sure. If I didn't have a job and stuff, and
yeah, nothing, no other book in the house, and nothing else to do. I'll give it a try.
Yep.
So speaking of the book taking time to get used to, who the hell was Teresa? I still don't know at the end, but there are all these references to her and somewhat snarky references to her, no less. Is she supposed to be the female equivalent of Shalmaneser, the computer?
I don't know.
Teresa.
Yeah.
I haven't read it that long ago.
There were a lot of, like, let me see if I can find some, but a lot of references to Teresa, and I couldn't figure out who or what she is. And let me see.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I'm not recalling Teresa at all.
Yeah.
No.
Where they keep Teresa, say? Heard the new one about Teresa? And find she's as cold as Teresa. She isn't a freak because it's because, yeah, I think she's a computer. I think she's another computer.
Right.
Yeah. A randy young wench named Teresa tried her charms out upon Shalmaneser.
I completely missed that. Apparently, I do need to reread.
Well, it definitely is not surprising that you can miss stuff in this book, because I know I missed a lot of stuff. Yeah. Yeah, but they did mention other computers besides Shell,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
because they mentioned one in they mentioned the Americans and their allies, and or what few they have left, boast above their unprecedented degree of personal freedom and submit their sovereignty to a computer in Washington. And so there was definitely mentions of other computers in there, and that's just like a little snarky comment upon Americans. Supposed to be the land of the free, but yet we submit to whatever Washington's saying. So that's he had a lot of snarky commentary like that in this book, and
Oh yeah.
but that was another reference to other computers, so it wasn't like Shao was unique in that I think it was just the most advanced kind of
Yeah.
computer that they were um, eventually relying upon to solve this one country's problems, and I thought it was kind of it's kind of strange how Chad came in and saved the day, kind of with that situation, um, with that computer. What was the name of the place? I can't even remember now. Was it
Beninia.
was it Beninian?
That's
That's
what.
that's where
Mm,
that's where it was. That's
yeah.
where and it it's like you like Chad as a character, but he kind of becomes like the the guy who can do no wrong at some point, and he's what do you call that? Like a Mary Sue or something like that.
Mm,
The character that can do no wrong and the character who's always does the right thing. Um,
yeah.
and it, it was and I didn't even think about that till later, till I was like, oh yeah, he like because through the book, Donald has all these doubts and fears, and he does stuff that's not always right, and he's always trying to um, fix some of his mistakes or what have you, and he has a lot of doubts about, and he goes to a hospital and everything else, and Norman too. He gets in trouble with his bosses, and and so there's all these two well-rounded characters eventually that have foibles and good and bad about them, and Chad just kind of comes in and everybody pays attention to him and he saves the day, and he and then he's off in the woods with his zoologist or whatever, and so yeah, I didn't know it. It just kind of dawned on me now that he's not really a fully developed character. He's kind of a Mary Sue.
He's almost omniscient. And yeah, back to what Farja was asking, if it represents the author in some way. Uh, Probably, maybe we always there's always a character that try to channel, but I don't think it was so much about channeling his opinions as it was to make the reader come up with their own, to just um, to either read it as a satire, or as a critique, or as something hilarious, to just read it and then think about it to formulate their own. It was definitely a catalyst for both the narrative and the world building.
Hmm.
But yeah, uh, Mary Sue, yeah, close enough. The Mary Sue kind of fulfills the realization of a fantasy more than
Yeah,
just an insert. So this is what I want to say, or what I want you to think.
yeah,
Still
very
clever
true.
though.
Yeah. That. I think you both are referring to things that happen later or towards the end in the book, but the part I got to was the conversation between Chad and Shalmaneser, where he tells him about Benignia as a country and that it's different, and that he just needs to accept that and move on with its analysis. Uh, yeah, I thought I really enjoyed that chapter. That was one of my favorites in this book. I Yeah, that was fascinating to read.
Yeah, but it also brings up the question of this is early on in the advent of AI, and you know what the future is going to look like with AI. And he it's I found it fascinating that he brought that up, because Shalman sir is now an AI running a country basically. And and I thought that was fairly prophetic on Bruno's part, um, because we're in a completely new AI age now, and that that might have seemed at the time to be like, oh yeah, yeah, whatever, computer's going to rule the world, but that's more of a reality every day. So
Yeah,
he got it.
true.
Yeah, and
I think
summarize. Sorry, go ahead, Susanna.
no, I think he understood people and understood society very well.
Mm.
Yeah, and I think, at least with regards to Shalmaneser and how he's put to use, both just the computation aspect of it as well as the intelligence aspect of it, right? Like the summaries of news that is done, like he gets some information that he then digests it. You're basically getting information filtered by AI, which, there are apps today that summarize news for you or summarize books for you, which, like, what is the point of that? But and they there are, I guess, ChatGPT does summaries. And yeah, like even the simpler programs that are not, machine learning models, there are some that do summaries. I thought that was pretty cool. I don't know enough of the computer science history to, like, I don't think we were processing language in that manner in 68, certainly. So that was pretty cool for him to predict. And there was so many other ways in which Shalmaneser was used, which is so reminiscent of how we use computers today, and machine learning models in particular. I thought that was pretty fascinating. I think that's my keyword for today. Fascinating. This.
Yeah.
Um, so that was, and I guess follow up from that discussion, there were some comments both in the scene following the one in which Chad convinces, Shalmaneser, I was going to say Chat GPT, but Shalmaneser to accept data and move on. When he says, "Oh, you guys have all been wondering whether you've made a intelligent machine, right, or machine with free will," and you have, because free will is the ability to make mistakes. I think that's what he says, if I remember correctly. And then there are some other speculations about whether or not Shalmaneser is, I don't think sentient is quite the word they use, has consciousness. I think that's the thing they wonder about. And they have various definitions throughout the book, which I don't remember enough of them to see if I agree with them or think along the same lines as they do, because there were opinions on what constitutes consciousness and what's a sufficient test of consciousness. But it was interesting, like interspersed throughout the book, the ideas were fascinating. And I think that's also the, I guess, and a sample of all the other themes that are threaded throughout the book. The different perspectives we get throughout them was very interesting. Like I think because of the style, he presented the same thing to us, or gave us like 7 or 8 different perspectives on every theme that he has explored in this book, because I think the style really supports that. So that was really cool. Like with just 2 main characters, but a lot of fragments about the state of the world, he gave us a very diverse picture and insight into all the things that he explored, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. And I tabbed that line too that you put out, that you just said it with the did nobody ever point out to you that the only liberty implied by free will is the opportunity to be wrong. And yeah, that was a great line, and there was like other great lines like that in here too. That like I said before, it was a lot of good writing that I kind of wish was put into a sociological essay rather than throwing it into the chaotic beginning of a story that came later. Um, and it just that's what all these tabs are that I have in this book is all these really cool lines that he put out there. And
Mm-hmm.
um, like I'm coming to think that lying is among the worst of all of human failings, and stuff like that. And he explains that line and the dialogue between the characters, and I was just like, oh, that's really really cool stuff. Um, and including there was one guy who said, "Curse computers for a trick of Shaitan," which is like Satan, um, and and it's like, wow, he's really predicting all the stuff that people are going to say in the future. So pretty good
Yeah.
stuff.
Yeah, yeah, that's pretty cool. And what else was I gonna say? Yeah, the country of Benigna. How I love the idea of a country. Both the countries that Norman and I'm going Donald end up in, they are made up countries, right? They don't actually exist, right? Right?
I think,
Okay.
yeah,
Benignia
Um,
doesn't exist, definitely.
no, the
yeah,
other one either. What's it called?
Yucatan. If I'm
Katatang, something like that. Yeah,
Yatakang, Yucatan,
something like that.
Yucatan, I think.
Yeah,
Uh,
Yakatang.
uh,
Yeah, that's right.
yeah, which seems like a mix of a lot of Asian countries. But well, where was I going with this? Yeah, the whole idea of Benigna, and I guess at least as far as I've gotten, the explanation for why it is the way it is, and how a country could be like that. There was a possibility there. Again, like I'm doing predictions because I haven't finished the book, but the um, you could see one of the ways this could end up is if the whole world got absorbed by this country and became peace loving and no mucking and all the other things that are currently wrong with the world. I don't think that's actually going to happen, but the fact that a place like this exists opens up the possibilities, right? And I think that's kind of the hope that gives us, like buried in all the cynicism that Mulligan's giving us. There's this country with the hope that is given, like with its people. I loved that. I loved that bit.
Well, you might be disappointed.
Oh, damn it.
Yeah, I think he was very optimistic in that regard because basically it would be changing human nature. So you'd have to sacrifice part of your humanity for the sake of peace, I suppose, but you wouldn't solve anything. Then the population would keep growing and they would no longer fit on Zanzibar, have to move to Madagascar. I don't know. Yeah, because that's the thing. It doesn't actually tell us, what the characters want or what he wants or, what is the best outcome. It just, all the information is here. Now you make up your mind. And it doesn't hold any punches. There's nothing politically correct in this book. So it will really,
Yeah.
really tell us, goes to the heart of every issue, of every question, and to make us think.
Yeah.
But would it be a solution? So we are thinking about it.
Yeah. I mean, I'm kind of hesitant to give away the
Yeah, that's because I don't want to spoil too much since Sasha hasn't read. But yeah.
Oh, that's
Along those
absolutely fine.
lines.
I only
'cause
have
it's
50
like
pages. I'll finish like
it's
soon
like
after we
within
finish.
it's within like the last 5 or 6 pages that you understand why Beninian is the way it is.
Okay.
So
He actually
So I
does
already
give an
give a
explanation.
little bit. You said it was
yeah,
50 pages. Yeah, sorry.
and
Yeah.
yeah, and it's, I don't know. I thought it was kind of a. I didn't really like the explanation myself. I was kind of like, it was a bit of a, almost a bit of a cop out, a little bit,
Mm.
and it was kind of um like what's the word I'm looking for?
Too simplistic, I think.
Yeah, it's a little simplistic, and it I don't think I think that's the part of his social science that was off.
Mm.
If I yeah, if out of the whole book, I think that part, I think it was a little quite, yeah, simplistically inaccurate to
Mhm.
how people are, or how or how DNA works. I don't think it was quite
But
there.
that was all the way through the genetic stuff. I
Yeah,
At some
yeah,
point I was rolling my eyes and then kind of skimming. It was just,
yeah,
and he was very optimistic to think that people would strive for the best possible offspring. Um,
yeah.
or
And I don't know enough about genetics and about DNA and all that stuff in order to really have a good handle on that. But I just know that his ending and the reason for the ending, the explanation of Beninia at the ending, just did not jive at all. But um, maybe maybe somebody else might like that. But
Yeah, I'm gonna have to finish that immediately after the discussion. So I think that brings us nicely to the whole thread around the eugenics legislations. What did you guys make of that?
um,
Dare I call
was
it a theme of the book? But
yeah, was this, when did China put in their one child policy?
mm,
Was
was
that
it
Good
in the
question.
60s?
in the 60s, or was it? I'm wondering if that's kind of like a commentary on that. This,
Mm,
this book is um, kind of a commentary on that or not. I don't know. I can't remember when they started that. Um,
I
and
guess.
if they didn't start it yet, then Brunner predicted it would happen. But
1980. So no.
so that was
Mm,
later. Okay, so Brunner was worried about something like that occurring, um, and he yeah, but yeah, the eugenics stuff. Um, I think it's problematic in this novel, to say the least, and I'm not sure. I'm just not sure it works that way. I don't know. I don't know enough about genetics and DNA and stuff, and whether or not the way he presented it didn't seem to really make make sense to me at all.
Yeah, the science was very advanced. Um, some of the situations arising from it were quite brutal. It was like, I can't believe I just read this.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah, yeah. Brutal's right. Especially since he implicated a lot that
yeah,
he didn't come right out and say. In some cases he did say stuff that was kind of not pleasant to read, and in other cases he implicated stuff that you didn't want to go there if you thought about it. Um, so a book of its time, because I know that was a controversial subject of study during the 60s.
but I did get the impression throughout that um, there was a lot of not quite explicit, but counter arguments to eugenics, right? Like all the things that could go wrong. There were some arguments for, but they felt somewhat sarcastic in tone. and all the things that don't work or aren't great about it. But yeah, there wasn't any. So my issue with it is, as they were going about it in this book, I think the woman who was keeping her baby, like continuing to take drugs so that the baby would never see the real world. That was a really interesting example of why this policy in and of itself is kind of like not going to do what they want, because one, apparently there's a drug that can completely destroy the fetus, and they were concerned that they'd put out a handicapped person into the world, and so they didn't want that. But they're okay as long as your limbs are functioning, you're okay. So I guess that they don't know yet, it's not implied, at least the gene for intelligence, but there are a lot of things. I think this book says so without explicitly saying so, that despite what the eugenics legislations in this book are terming defects, people can do really well and contribute to society, and be good functioning members that are good for the propagation of the human race, versus people like this person who's allowed to have a child, but she's like completely destroying uh, the child. At least, like, to me, that's how it reads, but maybe there are people who might not think that. But that that that's one, not sufficient, and two, it's probably not even going to really do what they want from it all, right? So it felt like very subtle commentary on all of that, although I'm not sure what the question behind the question, so to speak, is like, what, because that I'm trying to understand, like what Jared was talking about earlier with the one child policy in China, what the real world concern is that he was commenting on with all this conversation on the eugenics thread. Like, was that something that was being considered in the 60s for controlling world population, or is it just a future in which he's imagining that this is a way of population regulation and here are all the things that can go wrong? Because, like, I know, like, several centuries ago eugenics was a thing, right? Or was it more recent than that? But not, yeah. So I'm curious about what it is that he's actually writing about with all the stuff that he's written about eugenics. But yeah, overall it felt like it was done very subtly. Like, it felt like very subtly saying, this is not okay, like, don't do this.
Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah, I know overpopulation was a concern already in the 60s. And there was a lot of studies put out then, and some of them were proven to be were debunked. Some of the studies that were put out have been systematically debunked since then. And but some of them were genuinely concerning as well. That in the concerning part of overpopulation studies that are still active today have to deal basically with just resources, with how can we keep up the resources to continually support the population, and if it's going to grow bigger. And there's been a lot of papers saying that the population will eventually level off, and there's been other ones that say it's going to get to a tipping point that's going to be catastrophic. But the some of the debunked overpopulation stuff that came out in the 60s were some of them were downright racist in their application, and those have been debunked, and some of them were bordering on that. And that, I don't know if, because Brunner doesn't get that deep into that stuff in here. He tinkers around the edges somewhat. And so I'm not sure how much and what sources he was using for this little essay on overpopulation that he wrote. that he turned into a story. But
Little, huh?
yeah. So, but to put all try not to get too serious here, but the but he was definitely touching on a lot of stuff in here that and you like you said, Vasha, some of it he argues against and some he argues for. So he's definitely playing with all the arguments that were probably around at the time and throwing them in there, and he's leaving a lot for us to decide on how much of it is relevant and what have you. And so that's pretty deep stuff. I think I'd rather just enjoy a story and see if Donald survives the day. But
Fair enough. There was one other thing. Oh, okay. So since we can talk about some fun stuff for a bit, I guess there was the slang that is used in this book. A lot of it was interesting, or even just language or terminology. Like they tell time using terms like antimatter and papa mama. What the heck was that? And
it was so hard to read. I never knew if it was a made up word or if it was a word I didn't know. If I had to go and check, things didn't make sense. And what did I just read? And that's why it took so long to read.
And it almost felt like antimatter and papa mama was always following a number, I guess. So it was, I guess, some way of telling time. But antimatter, I guess it was day of the month or something. I have no idea, but why were the terms used there? I was very curious, but fun too. And a lot of the chapter titles were puns, like the one in which the man from Moon talks about how life is better on the moon and like people cooperate there and so on. It's called it had the word lunatic in it, and the man was talking about why people on Earth go berserk sometimes. So,
no, everything is so clever, and even the things that I didn't like from, like I said in the beginning, this kind of social media approximation, it was reading to it, and it was deliberately so at the beginning to prompt the reader into this state of aggravation, because it's just one horrible thing after the other, completely disjointed. So you just become frustrated. One, when does the story start? Two, why am I reading this? Three, I really don't care. Why are you telling me this? The aggravation. By the time you get to the actual narrative, you're already, again, I don't want to spoil the end for Varsha, but you Jared, you're kind of in that state, that genetic state. You're oozing pheromones. So when I realized that, that's when I said, "Oh, you genius, just bastard genius."
The first chapter, it gave, or maybe it was the second or third, I don't remember, but it had all these like random snippets of information, and then it also told us about some of the characters who we're going to meet on a regular basis. Like there was this one line about Donald Hogan is a spy. That was it. And then we meet Donald later, but yeah, I was curious. Like there were things that stood out and looked important, like they're going to apply to the rest of the story. But it is a very interesting structure overall, for sure.
Yeah, and that reminds me, like what you just said there, Donald Hogan's a spy. There's a lot of that in the beginning, especially in the beginning being like 350 pages long.
It's worth pointing out.
There's a lot of that where he's telling you stuff, and he's just telling it, and there's no there's no development of the character. He's just telling you what the character is. And that was aggravating to me as well, because it's like,
Yeah.
I want to find out about this character through his words and action, not just you, the narrator, telling me what the character is. And it was a lot of that, so he could tell his so he could do his little experiment here, and then give us a little bit of story at the end. So that aggravated me a lot about this book.
Mm. Again with the little, Jared. Little experiment, little essay. Okay.
Massive.
Massive, yeah.
Um, so another question I have for you guys is the whole thing around shiggies. That was one aspect of the book that really bothered me because
God, that was aggravating too.
yeah, it just felt very disrespectful overall because there are no counter examples of there are no good female characters and this is it, they're shiggies, or there are some random pregnant women we get perspectives of who are trying to have a child, and that's it. And oh my gosh, just the whole thing around that aspect of society is just apparently they don't even have homes. They go around living in other people's homes. And yeah, I just didn't like reading that at all.
Mm-hmm.
Agreed.
Yeah, agreed. Yeah, it was unnecessary.
Yeah, that's just
there were very brief mentions of other female characters that weren't either a shiggy or pregnant, and and one of the ones that was briefly mentioned ends up getting it on with her brother, and so it's just like, oh, okay, a little Game of Thrones going on here too, but yeah, it was not very female friendly, this book at all, as far as characters or even background characters or whatever,
yeah. I would have settled for no female characters, but not treating every female in the world quite so strangely / disrespectfully, in my opinion. But yeah, it's just it made my skin crawl. I did not like that part of it, and I got over it enough that there were parts of the book I enjoyed. Like I said, I do not dislike this book so far. I even enjoy it, enjoy parts of it, but that bit I categorically did not like.
Yeah, I mean, it would have been one thing if it was just a nickname for a certain aspect of society, but he never expanded beyond that, and
exactly.
gave you other examples in the world of women or anything. It was that was it. That was his whole viewpoint on women. Period. It was either shiggies or just somebody to get pregnant, and it was just like, okay.
Yeah, that was exactly my problem with it. That it would have been fine if there were some female characters or some other parts of society that weren't this, but that was it. That was the entirety of the female half of well, if not the world, at least the New York social scene, apparently. So anyway, the other topic I had, sorry, I just made a sort of list and I'm bringing them up one by one, but did either of you have anything to bring up meanwhile before I start another topic?
Carry on.
Cool. Okay. The whole thing around the muckers, that was vaguely interesting. The only explanation, if I'm not mistaken, we get for it is one of Chad Mulligan's rants, which I didn't strictly think was a great explanation for why people run amok in this society. But what did you think of of the integration of that aspect of it, that people hate being crowded so much that they go berserk sometimes.
Yeah, with that I agree. I can't see that happening. It was taken to the extreme because not everyone reacts that way, but certainly crowds can make you lose patience very quickly.
Traffic can
Exactly, being stuck. Yeah.
yeah. So yeah, I guess in a way that makes sense.
Oh,
I've seen
I wonder
I've
how
seen
he
some.
would. I wonder how he would react to some of the road rage we see nowadays.
Oh yeah,
But
yeah, exactly. Some really nice people I know. Oh, the road rage they have.
yeah,
That there and in the line at the airport where we're supposed to pull out trays and put our laptops. Those are the two places.
okay. So Vasha's
Lots of
gonna
stuff
go
around.
on a mucker rampage when she comes home.
Don't cut the damn line. Anyway.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I thought it was kind of funny how people were so impressed that Donald overcame a mucker when he
oh yeah.
and I was like, okay. I mean, I didn't know muckers were so powerful that people were afraid to fight back with them, other than
It
maybe the authorities or something. But yeah, it like you said, it wasn't the explanation for them wasn't quite in depth. I would say it was kind of just kind of a side thing.
yeah.
But
It
yeah.
yeah, it was just a Mulligan rant, and my whole issue with those is they don't. I mean, it's a hypothetical world, but they don't feel well researched in the sense that the tone of their writing isn't is not. It doesn't give off the impression that it's well researched. It's just a man ranting about what he's angry about. So
Mm.
yeah, so yeah, it did make for interesting tension in parts, right? Like was it Norman? Yeah, it was Norman who was told that he started the riot just by being there, which just reeks of victim blaming. Like, oh, you shouldn't have dressed like that. You shouldn't have gone out. So
Mm.
um yeah, I don't know if that was commenting on that kind of reaction to someone being hurt because of where they are or who they are. But yeah, that was interesting too, that Norman participating in a riot, if not starting one. And I guess there's a like very subtle or very small aspect to that as well, where they participated in the mob, which I think a lot of authors have that bit of commentary where you lose control and start and participate with the mob,
Mm.
not and you don't know what it is you're doing. I think the person who came to rescue him, was it Donald come to rescue him? Yeah, he says I was also throwing stones at
I
some
think it
point.
was actually I think it was Donald who started the riot
Oh, it was the other way around. Donald. Oh yeah,
inadvertently,
yeah. Okay.
and I
Yeah.
think
Okay.
yeah, I think it was Norman who came to rescue him.
Okay. Got it. Got it.
Because I actually tabbed that somewhere and I don't remember where it was, but yeah, he did have some interesting commentary upon mob mentality and how crowds react in a situation like that. And it was interesting stuff. It was more social commentary that he had a lot of in this book, and so there, like as we said before, there's a lot of interesting words in here. There's a lot of interesting, chaotic jumble of words in this massive essay here.
Thank you. Oh, the other slang that I liked was, well, I liked fasten it instead of shut it. and feels more sophisticated. But I also liked the way they used orbit. Are you in my orbit, or you're off your orbit, and so on.
That was a good one.
That one was one that I
Personal
could
space.
actually,
Yeah, that's pretty cool.
adopt. Yeah, that was pretty cool. Cool. I have run through my list. Do either of you have more topics to bring up for the book?
No, I am glad that I read it, and there's a lot to unpack. Maybe one day I will reread it in a different order and see what I've missed. Because apparently I missed loads. I have no recollection of a Teresa. I swear. So
Yeah.
clearly, I wasn't giving it my full attention towards the end. So I need to.
Yeah, the Teresa thing was really interesting because I think it was either Norman or Donald who mentions her first, and I thought, okay, she's a girlfriend, a previous girlfriend that he's annoyed at or something. And then some random person who was not related at all to either of them talks about a Teresa, and then some people talk about her as if she's some publicly known figure. And yeah, it drove me nuts. That's why I remember it, because I couldn't figure out who the hell she was. But
okay. Maybe I thought she was.
Sorry,
maybe I thought she was just another Shiggy. I don't know.
Yeah, it does start that way. In fact,
evil.
she is referred to as Shalmaneser's Shiggy in one of the little poem things.
Of course.
That was okay. One more thing that I forgot to bring up: Mr. and Mrs. Everywhere. Comment.
I can't remember.
Mr. and Mrs. Everywhere rings a bell, but what was the comment?
So it's apparently this couple that, this virtual couple that you can see yourself in. So you don't compete with the Joneses anymore. You compete with Mr. and Mrs. Everywhere, and it's supposed to be a much more attainable goal. I guess it's a different way to sell people things, and and you can have them wear your face, and they go on vacations, and so basically, people live vicariously through Mr. and Mrs. Everywhere, and they even get to wear their faces. They sometimes you see them in your house, and so on. So,
is that what that was? Okay.
It makes sense. Okay, I'm gonna need to give this more attention.
Yeah. No, see that might have been some of the sections I read through. But
yeah, it did come
because those were in the like the news sections or whatever. Yeah. So that makes sense, and that's a very interesting social commentary for, because what have many people been doing but living vicariously through our Hollywood idols or whoever in the news or in the media,
Influencers.
Yeah. Nowadays it's influencers, and so that's very spot on social commentary there on his part for that one. That's pretty clever.
Yeah, and they go everywhere, so they call Mr. and Mrs. Everywhere.
Yeah, that's How many people have travel YouTube channels that people just follow them as they travel around the world or what have you? It's
good life.
It's very good.
Yeah. And this is one of those things where, like, things like this and the puns in the chapter titles, it almost feels like there are parts of it that the author didn't take too seriously. Like the book is not taking itself too seriously. The bits of fun interspersed through all of that, which is always a great tool to make me think more because of the breaks it's giving, and sort of like the little bit of lack of depth there makes me focus more on the things that are in fact deep. So that's pretty cool.
Yeah, I'm surprised you haven't read the last page. So.
I didn't. So I only do that for books that I'm really interested in, and I'm like dying to know how it ends, which this one, admittedly, until right now, not not really. So, okay, so if that's all, then let's do outros. Unless either of you have more topics to bring up about this book.
No, I just I didn't like it, but I hope if anybody's listening to this, you'll see what's in the book and you'll get a good idea of whether or not you like it. It is quite the big experiment. So with that said, I'm at the Fantasy Thinker YouTube channel, and I'm also at pagechewing.com, where we do lots of podcasts on different things like science fiction books and speculative speculations and film chewing and comics and everything else we do on there. So check it out.
Yeah. Also, I recommend this book. I think it's a masterpiece, even though I did not enjoy it. I think there's a lot to learn from it as a writer, and maybe it will please other readers, more than it did me. I mean, it's definitely worth the read because there's nothing like it. I know that I say this about pretty much every book in this series, that I've never read anything like this, but trust me, there's no non-novel out there quite like this, not even close. So go and read it, and you can find me at the Den of the Weird or on the Page Chewing forums.
Nice. And your books on everywhere books are sold, right?
Oh yeah, Amazon, pretty much Kobo, everywhere. Yeah, you'll find them. Just
cool.
You can't miss them.
And you can nice. And you can find me on the YouTube channel Reading by the Rainy Mountain. This discussion group is open to anybody interested. If you'd like to join us, consider checking out the Patreon forum, which is where we do all the planning. Or you can just talk to us on the forum if you're not interested in participating in the actual chat here. And like I said, if you're reading along with us or cherry picking which ones to read, the next 3 books coming up are The Dispossessed by Ursula Le Guin, The Drowned World by J.G. Ballard, and The Sirens of Titan by Kurt Vonnegut. We will see everybody next month with The Dispossessed. Thank you so much for listening. See you soon. Bye.